KoshienCast, everyone, the world's #1 Jean-Jacques Leroy fan podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is this very special guest, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
Going all right, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. That's a pretty good tagline. I hope we can stay consistent with that.
Oh, we can only hope so. So, this is week 9 of the fall season. We are, of course, covering all sports anime from November 27th to December 3rd. And, shockingly, for the first time in about a month, we actually have all the shows to cover this week.
Yeah, no unscheduled outages from any of the 9 series we cover.
Right.
Unexpected considering the recent quality of shows like Tiger Mask and Long Riders. They managed to pull it together, if only for 1 week.
1 week. So we got a lot to cover this week, so I'm just going to go ahead and just jump right into Yuri on Ice.
All right.
So this week we continue off from where we basically ended last week. We have essentially all of the main contestants performing the second act of their routine. We have Emil performing his cyberpunk routine,
Right.
which is kind of an interesting routine. We have Mikkel having to perform a dance to essentially break up with his sister,
Right.
as she basically insists. And then we also have, most importantly, we have Yurio performing his routine after his grandfather does end up coming to visit him just before his match, or his performance,
Right.
which sort of inspires him to push himself further than he has before. He's doing something crazy like doing 6 loops in a single routine, which is something that is not generally done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have Yuri, who starts up his routine, and he's kind of, after seeing Yurio's routine, it seems to inspire something in him, which allows him to also try and perform some more, go a little bit beyond what he knows in his performance. He kind of starts off the episode saying, I'll just do what I do in practice with Victor, I'll just do the same thing with Yakov. And he kind of sees, I can't just do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to try and push myself a little further. And he basically ends up in 3rd place. And so then Jean-Jacques Leroy jumps in, and he just has the best routine.
Yeah.
He's basically like, I cannot let these kids overtake me.
Mm-hmm.
I have to just go out there and just do the best performance of my life. And he basically does, and gets 1st place. Right. And so Yuri gets 4th place. This knocks Yuri out of 3rd place. He goes into 4th place, but he just barely gets, squeezes by.
Mm-hmm. So
because he... What was that?
I was just going to say, yeah, so he's still able to go to the Grand Prix finale.
Right. But he also realizes that, I just barely squeaked by here. I gotta bring it back up.
Yeah.
And the episode ends with Yuri going off to meet Victor at the airport. The two have this very tender moment where they see each other on the other side of the glass as Victor is leaving the plane, and the two just start running side by side along one another, and Yuri just dives into him and asks Victor, I need you to be my coach forever.
Right.
And that's where the episode ends.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was Yuri getting off the plane, but yeah,
Oh, right. Well, Victor getting off the plane, but yeah. Or wait, was it Yuri?
It was Yuri.
Oh.
Yeah, it was Yuri flying back to Japan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes way more sense because Victor has his dog with him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Never
it's
mind.
Not that critical to the plot, though. Yeah. Overall, it was a good episode. It didn't. I mean, it was interesting in that the focus didn't really feel like it was on Yuri nearly as much as it has been previously.
Right. Which is kind of interesting. One of the biggest parts of this episode was, and I kind of alluded to this before, was Sala just laying down the law with her brother, with Mikkel, and being like, you cannot keep clinging to me like you have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of great lines when she basically confronts him before he goes on the rink, and the one that I thought was the most poignant was she told her brother, hey, I'm not every woman in the world.
Yes.
Like, and so she's like, you can't put me on this pedestal. You can't go around protecting me all the time. Like, I don't need your help. I'm an independent adult. I'm gonna go to the Grand Prix finale without your help, and I'm gonna date guys who aren't you. Like, so you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, exactly. And he kind of has a problem with that at first because he just sort of dives into her arms or just kind of like gives her a hug. Is like, no, like I need your support,
Yeah,
and she's like, you got to separate yourself from me, man.
yeah,
And so his big routine, I wasn't sure what to make of this honestly because he has this very soulful like very dreary piano music playing for his routine, and this is kind of supposed to represent his big breakup with his sister.
uh-huh.
And all I could think is, man, he really lucked out with his choice of music because don't they have to pre-select their tracks?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously a pleasant coincidence. I think while he was skating, actually, he said, Sala, this is the last time that I skate for you, and she's in tears, and they manage to reconcile somewhat, but they still ultimately Sala says, "Hey, well, clearly we're better apart than
Yeah,
together because you
yeah,
skated better than you ever have in your life."
right. Because he
Um,
beat his personal record by like 20 points, I think.
right, and I think there's a lot of ways that on the surface this whole dynamic is just weird and creepy. Like, why does he have such a seemingly romantic relationship with his sister?
Right.
And the flashback did something to mollify that for me, in that it illustrated that he's identified himself for a long time as someone who protected her. That whenever she was getting picked on by all those figure skating bullies out there, that he was there to help and to be her big brother, and he could be the person she depended on. And so on some level, I think he stayed in a childhood mindset too long where he felt like he needed to look out for his sister, he needed to protect her, he needed to be the only one who would look out for her, um, when she didn't need that anymore. When she had become independent and
Yeah.
didn't need a protector.
Right. And I was really happy to see the series turn around at the very end because the way that they were framing this whole thing about her
Uh
crying
huh.
was I thought they were going to go in this direction of okay, so she realizes she needs to stay close to her brother after
Uh huh.
all. And she just sort of dives into his arms and she's like, "I'm sorry I was so cruel with you." And it's like, are we really going to do this? And then immediately, just sort of flippantly, he was like, "But I'm glad I said it because, frankly, you're way better without me. All right, I'm going to go on and watch the next guys. Bye."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was kind of funny, and every time I feel like this show is going to disappoint me or come up
Right.
short in its nuance, it doesn't, which was a good outcome for sure.
Right.
So one other thing I wanted to bring up was Yurio. In that we never actually saw this routine before. One of the recurring things with this show is that we keep seeing Yuri's routine over and over and over, and we've seen Yurio's short routine a couple times, but we've never actually seen this one, which is the one that he was developing with
Right.
his ballet instructor. And I thought it was interesting. I mean, his outfit was certainly interesting, and that he was supposed to be on fire. Um, but I thought it sort of paired well with the way he was discussing his short routine, because what we said last week was so unique about his short routine was that he was complaining about how athletically difficult it was. It wasn't graceful, it was really, really hard work. It's something you see
Right.
throughout this episode where people just talk about how physically demanding this is. It's not like graceful wistfulness the way it appears on the surface. It's extremely difficult.
Right.
Um, and so he was trying, as his coach said, to pair strength with beauty. So his ballet instructor said that strength means nothing without beauty. And so he's able to sort of cut through the simplicity of just being strong, which he is, and also perform 6 jumps in the second half of his performance, which is supposed to be a demonstration of his physical strength and also his figure skating competence, that he would be able to do 6 jumps effectively right in a row is almost impossible. That's sort of what the
Yeah,
observers were
essentially.
saying on the outside. And at the end of his performance, he screams, "How do you like my performance, pork cutlet bowl?" And Yuri, of
Yeah,
course, isn't watching.
Yeah, they keep coming back to the pork cutlet bowl, um, especially because it was really interesting because even his grandfather, he brought him. I don't remember the type of food
Piroshki.
it is. Piroshkis. Okay, thank you. He brought him piroshkis that were stylized as a pork cutlet bowl,
Yeah.
essentially, or they had all the ingredients of it.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about
And
pork cutlet bowls a lot. He really fixated
lot.
on that.
Yeah, and it's because I get that they're doing that because that was part of Yuri's sort of idea of unconditional love.
Well,
But
yeah.
I don't understand why they keep going back to it.
I think it's just a shorthand that they use
Right.
for how different characters are relating to Yuri in the way that they describe or have an interest in a pork cutlet bowl. I mean, basically, this
Right.
only applies to Victor and Yurio. Um,
Um
but
I did think it was interesting though because one of the things I kind of left out of the summary was that Yurio meets Yuri sort of leaves the rink in a daze
uh-huh.
after his routine, and there's kind of a funny gag where Sala, like after Sala, she's walking with Mikkel, and she's kind of like, we like, yeah, I don't know if you're gonna keep go on uh, to the next stage or not, but you did a good job and everything. And then she sees Yuri there, and she's like, and she kind of runs up to him. She's like, "Oh, hi Yuri, what's going on?" And then he just sort of like hugs her.
Yeah.
And then Mikhail's like, "What are you doing to my sister?" And then he just hugs him.
Yeah. What
And
did
then he
what did
just
you
starts
think
hugging
that was
everybody.
supposed to be?
Well, because Victor at the beginning of the episode said, if you're having problems, like if Yakov is scolding you
Right.
or telling you off, after he's done, you just need to hug him.
Yeah.
And so I guess Yuri, in sort of his days, was just trying to, because he was already feeling very guilty about the fact that the only reason he's moving on is because he did better in a previous
Yeah.
basically in a previous cup,
Mm-hmm.
basically in the one he just got back from
Right. In China.
in China. Yeah, exactly. So I guess in his mind, he's sort of apologizing to these skaters for essentially skimming by.
Huh. That's interesting. On the surface, I just saw it as like a weird, goofy comedy gag of
Right.
Yuri
And I think
Yuri
that's largely
grabbing
what it was supposed to
a lot of
be.
people. It was funny seeing him grabbing Yurio and like all the people who had no interest in having him grab them.
Like Jean Jacques.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do you want to bring up JJ's routine real quick before we move
Yeah.
on?
The major thing I took away from that was that JJ was just getting fired up during the entire routine. He said this line with just such passionate intensity. There isn't enough love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because he has this because again we've kind of discussed this whole idea of his whole that he has this masculine routine. He kind of brings this sense of like male pride
Uh-huh.
almost to figure skating, or traditional male pride.
Right.
And so to hear him just call out with such intensity, like, there isn't enough love in this rink,
Yeah.
it just sort of has this battle cry almost, just to get the crowd even more fired up.
Yeah. And he's doing it for all the amazing people of Canada. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Uh,
mean, that's really the important part.
well, yeah, I saw it mostly just as an expression of dominance, right?
Right.
Because he was able to perform 4 quads and he performed them perfectly. So basically, he had the highest technical difficulty on his routine and he executed all of his jumps. So, there's a lot of nuance that goes into this, like, Sung Gil trying to calculate exactly how he can maximize his score, a lot of other people trying to, like Yuri, trying to build up his score because of his aesthetics and how well he embodies the
Right.
character. Um, JJ just is technically dominant, so none of the nuance matters. He is just so good at the athletic feats that no one can catch up to him. So I think it was just meant to sort of blow everyone out of the water and say, like, there's no catching up with me. Like, you
Right.
can't trick your way into beating me. I am the dominant force.
Which is interesting because it's playing off the whole idea of in a lot of sports anime we have that just such that dominant player, essentially that perfect player that nobody is able to beat or just they can just barely scratch
Uh-huh.
by. And he seems to be sort of an idealization of that type of character because he's not necessarily like a bad person. It
No,
seems
he's just
like
forceful.
right. He just has a very forceful and dominant personality.
Hmm.
So, speaking of very forceful and dominant personalities, did you want to move on to Haikyu?
Yeah, sure. Uh, so this is the penultimate episode of Haikyu this season, sadly, but it was a good one. Uh, it starts off exactly where episode 8 left off, where Tsukishi is running back onto the court. It sort of explains a little more on what happened to him. Essentially, his pinky was dislocated, so they had to tape his pinky to his ring finger to immobilize it. But he's able to come back into the game, and now the two teams are basically stuck in a deuce. Um, there's a lot of observation on the differences between these two teams, where Karasuno is judged to be unpredictable because they don't have any tradition. Whereas Shiratorizawa has a certain particular powerhouse style, so they have trouble adapting to Karasuno's unpredictability, which is how they got to this point in the first place. As the match goes on, the Shiratorizawa coach comments on Hinata and says that bigger guys will always be stronger because that's nature's rule. And he says that I, with my 40 years, wish to deny you victory. And he's speaking to Hinata. Um, and there's a lot of back and forth. And the tally keeps going back. Like Karasuno has multiple attempts where they can actually put the game away. They're unable to. Ultimately, Hinata gets set up for a spike. He jumps up and he connects, and they fade to black. So you don't actually see what is going to happen next week, but presumably the match isn't quite over yet.
Yeah. So, this was still, as usual, a very good episode. Um, what did you think?
Well, for me, it was just as much a display of a lot of what made episode 8 great. It was top tier animation, it
Of
was
course.
unpredictability, it was new camera angles, new strategies, new ways of portraying this that felt forceful. It made my heart race.
Did
It,
it make your heart go doki doki?
yeah, that's what I was trying to allude to. Um, I don't know. I felt like I could feel the pressure in a way. I
Right.
loved a lot of the moments where you realize that even though it feels like this match is going to go on forever, like if Karasuno is just able to get 1 point, they'll win. The game
Right. And they're just
they're almost over. They just can't quite make it. The one thing I want to say, and I will pass it over to you eventually, is I loved a number of instances. My favorite being when with Tanaka, where they're realizing that their bodies are shutting down on them,
right.
and they're having to deal with that. At one point, Tanaka is running forward in order to jump and make a spike, and he's hitting his legs while he's running. And
Oh wow. I
demand,
didn't even notice
yeah,
that.
as he's hitting his leg, he's just like, please work, work, just work. And he's able to ultimately, make the jump. But there's other times where people's legs fail them.
Right.
Like at one point, Daichi, he knows he needs to move forward, but his legs aren't responding quick enough, and Nishinoya has to cover for him. So I liked the portrayal of the physical exhaustion. Even Ushiwaka is not himself and not able to perform
Right.
the so. overall, I liked it a lot in that you really believed the fact that they were at their limits. A lot of lesser shows will just have people make mistakes for no reason, and have shortcomings for no reason with no background to it. This one, it feels like if these characters are making mistakes at this point, it's earned, and you can see why they would be so
Yeah.
exhausted that they're not able to perform the way they normally do.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it, I feel like. So, like, for example, another thing I noticed is something I really love, just a very small detail about it is, like, with Suki, there's a moment there where they just keep having this extended rally, and poor Suki is just constantly pushing himself. And there's a moment where he's just standing in front of the net. It's like on the third time the ball comes
Yeah.
back to them, and he has his hand up, his broken hand essentially, and it's just you can just see it constantly trembling, and you can just by that small little animation, you can just feel just this whole. They can't let this keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it can't. It just keeps going, and it won't end, and they just keep pulling ahead, and
And falling
it won't
back. Yeah,
end.
yeah, it won't end. I mean, that's it'll end next week, but
I mean, it has to end next week, and honestly, like, I feel like that ending was maybe one of the biggest teases we've had yet
uh-huh.
since covering the show, with the whole just that whole cut to black, and it's like that's the worst part is like it cuts to black, and then you hear the impact, so you technically don't even know what the impact was.
Right.
You assume it's the spike, but you can't be 100% sure
Yeah, it
about
could be
that.
a block.
Yeah, it could have been a block.
Yeah.
It could have been anything. It could have been
Out of
the ball
bounds.
hit Hinata in the face.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which,
But I'm pretty sure because based on the preview, it looks like they're still playing volleyball next week. So.
oh yeah, I mean, well, obviously that because the game, as you mentioned before, the game has to end.
Right. Um.
I thought an interesting point as well was that they mentioned that Ushi has basically scored half the points himself
Yeah.
just on his own.
Yeah.
And he's still just going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't even have a problem.
Well, he does though because
Right.
their setter Shibu, he said, oh Shirabu, excuse me, says that I'm only gonna set to you if you're actually performing like yourself. You understand that, right?
Right.
Everyone got really hesitant, like how can you say that to
Yeah,
Ushiwaka?
like how can you say that?
Right, but Ushiwaka says, yeah, no, you're right. If I'm not up to it, don't set to me. And there is some debate whether he's actually able to perform the way he should be. And at certain points he
Right.
does, at certain points he doesn't. He clearly still has a lot left in the tank.
Which I thought was because there was a really interesting moment where Karasuno was a point ahead and Asahi was serving, so they were like, "Okay, awesome, this is our moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is where we can finally like end this game." And Azumane, he does the spike, and it's too hard. He gets too excited and he knocks it over, and they're like, "Crap! Well, there we go." And now it's Ushi's serve,
Mm-hmm.
and Ushiwaka serves, and he has the exact same problem
Yep. Yeah, it
actually.
goes out of bounds.
Exactly, and I thought it was an interesting way that the the alumni from Karasuno from the glory days, they kind
Right.
of mentioned it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was kind of lucky of them for that, but that's still kind of part of their strategy because they're trying to pressure Shiro Torizawa, and it's finally starting to work a little bit. It's finally getting to Ushiwaka just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think the coach's narrative of how he resents Hinata has to do with where this match is going?
Because I'm guessing he. This is something I actually am not big on because it seems a little bit too convenient
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
It's just this whole thing. It's like, oh, I had this tragic backstory where I was looked down upon for being short, and I'm guessing there was something in his past that made like he probably lost a game
Mm.
because he couldn't reach the net or something like that, or his height prevented him from really doing what was necessary. But Hinata's gonna do something that probably he wasn't able to do due to his height, but Hinata is able to overcome.
Uh,
There was a nice little bit of characterization. I still don't mind it that much though, because again they tell it well enough. Like I love this moment. because some of the other people, like I think it's like some of the like one of the advisors and maybe like another coach on the team or something,
Uh-huh.
they're talking to themselves, they're talking amongst themselves on the side there, and they're talking. It's like, wow, that little guy is doing it. He's almost it's almost like he's the little giant, and then the coach just interrupts with like, bigger is always better.
Yep.
And it's
Exactly.
like, again, it's one of those things where Haikyu is smart enough to, it says a lot about his character. He doesn't, because obviously the little giant is a sore spot for him,
Mm.
because this is another character who effectively proved his methods wrong.
Right. Yep.
And rather than having to go into this whole thing of like, no, the little giant was wrong for blah 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 reason, and it's just, even though he was able to kind of succeed, there's some difference with Hinata. No, it's just this quick cutoff of, no, bigger is better.
Yeah. And for me, what that shows is that Shiratorizawa is definitely going to lose. Um, there,
Oh yeah,
old at the beginning of the series, we assumed Karasuno was going to win, so you can see them play different teams and all that.
right.
But Shiratorizawa had not necessarily established itself as a team that needed to learn a lesson, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of times with sports anime, you can predict who's going to lose based on someone making an insensitive or ignorant remark about themselves and needing to learn a lesson about who they are. And so the example here is Shiratorizawa's coach. He needs to learn the lesson the hard way
Yeah.
that bigger isn't always better, and that a simple strategy of physical dominance won't ultimately win.
Right.
So I think that pretty much seals it. I will still be excited to see how it's executed, but
Of
I
course.
can't imagine any way they could justify in the plot for Karasuno to lose now with that narrative going in.
It's something that a friend of mine mentioned to me, and it was a criticism of sports series that he mentioned, and it kind of plays into what you're saying here, which is an issue with a lot of sports series, is that when they get to the main tournament, they have to keep winning for the series to keep going,
Uh-huh.
essentially. And that is kind of a problem with Haikyuu a little bit, in that sense, because we know that, because I already know that the manga is still going on. I don't know what's going on in the manga, but it is still going on. So I have to assume that they win this
Mm-hmm.
match. But again, it's, as we've talked about before, it's not necessarily about the outcome, it's about the journey there.
Sure. Well, we only have 1 week left, and it'll be fun to see where the journey goes. Um,
Exactly.
so, marching right along, do you want to? This that was terrible. Do you want to?
No, it's fine.
Do you want to discuss March comes in like a lion?
March on, my friend.
Okay. So this picks up pretty much exactly where the last one left off. Again, we seem to be saying that a lot recently. Where Nikaido is still teaching the girls the rules of shogi with his children's book. Um, and that's pretty much its own segment of the episode. They sit down and describe how all the different pieces on a shogi board work, and a couple other rules about the game. And then they cut to like a 2 minute song about shogi that isn't translated
Again.
again. um, and then they move on. And ultimately, Nikaido goes over to Rei's apartment and stays over, whether Rei likes it or not. Brings a bunch of stuff so to furnish Rei's apartment. Um, Rei, the next day, he's sitting and he's talking with some of his friends at the shogi hall, and he remembers his father, his actual biological father. How when Rei started playing shogi, his favorite thing was seeing his dad concerned and focused on the board because it meant that Rei had done something well in the game, and he forced his father not to put up a facade, but to actually be so concerned with how the game was going that he was showing his true self.
Right.
When he gets back to his apartment, he sees that Kyoko is there. For some reason, Kyoko showed up at Rei's apartment. She demands to be let in. Rei really doesn't want her to stay. Ultimately, she says she has to go to the bathroom, and so he says fine, and she stays in. She then demands that she sleep over, so she sleeps in the bed that Nikaido had brought the night before, and says that she's glad that the time that her boyfriend Goto hit Rei, it didn't leave a scar. She says, and then she sort of taunts him because Rei's next match, which he needs to win in order to still have a shot at getting promoted anytime soon, is against a guy named Matsunaga, who is an older player who, if he loses this match, is probably going to be getting demoted and will have to retire from shogi. And Kyoko muses on whether Rei is too weak-willed and he's going to throw the match.
And uses the most really horrifying allegory, refers to it as, somebody has to go out and be the one to strangle the dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's not a nice person.
She's a very manipulative person who
Right.
he told her, please do not come into my apartment, please go anywhere else, and she said no. She demanded to be let in.
Right.
He
kept going back to the fact that the last train's coming in. If you want to get home, you might want to go do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Without ever just outright saying, just get out of here.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not comfortable enough. I mean, I think there's probably some fear there from past interactions with her. He can't confront her directly because he's a little afraid of her.
Yeah, I mean, well, understandably so. We've already seen how she's apparently caused him some sexual trauma, and then we've also seen how she's also apparently pretty responsible for some physical trauma.
Well, right. For who knows why, but her boyfriend assaulted Rei as well. So there's a lot there, which I'm sure we'll get somewhere along the line. Yeah, go ahead.
My big takeaway from this episode was that this was basically these past couple episodes have been basically Rei's hope. He had this wonderful discussion with Hina's crush, Takahashi. Hina's taking an interest in his life. He's getting people who are interested in him. But he's already starting to feel a little bit dejected from it, because, he was really excited that Hina asked him personally, hey, I want you to teach me shogi, please. And, all right, he's interacting with people. He's finally got something of a purpose now. And then here comes Nikaido. He steps in and basically hogs all the glory.
Yeah, and he wrote a book about it.
And he wrote a book about it, of all things.
Yeah.
And, he's going home, and he's already feeling pretty dejected, and then who should come but this very dark, awful figure from his past?
Yeah.
And I think Kyoko was described basically as the quiet thunder before the storm, essentially. Well, when she is introduced, Rei thinks back to a time when he remembers this thunder in the air, and he's like, oh, I thought it was really interesting and beautiful. But then I have to remind myself that immediately soon after that, we had this giant storm.
Right. And clearly the narration that he has is a little bit from the future, at least because and the chapter title when she shows up is Thunder, right? So there's every indication that something's about to go down.
Right. Well, because it's kind of interesting, because it's very much in the background, but I think Rei feels some attraction to Kyoko in some way.
Sure.
It's very hidden, but I think, this is just my guess for what happened, I think she did, during this form of sexual abuse, Rei felt some sort of connection to her, though. Right. Because, he was young, and, they're doing, I mean, let's just say they probably had sex of some kind.
Yeah, they're doing something in something sexual anyway, but
right.
And it's telling from what it was episode 4 or whatever, when he heard the term romance, the only thing he could associate that with was this incident, whatever happened between him and Kyoko.
And so what happens here is he sees her, and he knows that she's bad news. He knows that she is not good for him.
Yeah.
But I think there's a very small part of him that's also very hopeful. Because there's a moment when, as she's talking to Rei, he kind of, because she just sort of brings up out of nowhere that she knows what who his next match is against. And I think in his head, what they're trying to show is, oh, she's actually paying attention to me. She actually knows what's going on with my life. She's following my career. She cares. Because during this conversation, what starts off is Rei is thinking of Kyoko, and she's drawn in these very warm, almost kind of goofy characters. It's very similar to when they're doing sort of comedic moments with the sisters back at their place. And he's thinking of these situations with her, and it's very fun, and it's a little bit, it's nicer. And then, but as the conversation goes along, then we get to the point where she's basically goading him, and she's just like, oh, so you're gonna have to be the one who takes down this guy. Yeah, I don't think you're strong enough to do this.
I also thought it was interesting that he somewhat as a non sequitur brought up, so are you still dating that guy,
Yeah.
Which on
And
one level you could say, well, her boyfriend is a violent person who hurt him, so he's
right.
hoping that he's just not a part of her life anymore. But you wonder if there's some overlap with his feelings about her generally.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because when he asked that question, there's a very significant change in tone of that scene. Because before it's just sort of annoyance. He's just trying to get rid of her.
Yeah.
He's not happy about the fact that she's there, but there's just this sort of resignation to because it's like, okay, she's not going. She's going to be here.
Yeah.
Whatever. So, but, and then he sort of proceeds to just say, so are you still dating that one guy? And then there's this very interesting cut to darkness, and then this pale hand coming out and just sort of reaching around, and then it sort of ends in this sort of flat palm position, and, she's touching him, basically. She's put her hand up to his face, and that immediately shifts the tone of the conversation to, oh, okay, good, I'm glad he didn't leave a scar. And I thought that was interesting because, so the color scheme here is just a very pale hand and then just black.
Right.
And it's this moment where she sort of reconnects with Rei. And then later on in the conversation, we see, he asks, has he been violent with you? He's still concerned about her. And she's like, why is that a concern? Even if he is, like, I'd just stab him.
Yeah.
I'd stab him in his sleep. I don't care. She's like, and she says, I just love him that much.
Yeah.
And the color scheme there changes back to when she says that to when she reaches out to him. And I see that sort of colors change sort of signifying this sort of weird sense of love that she feels. Like, this is not a love that is right.
Yeah, there's indications, the way she talked to him, it was really interesting in that it seemed to cycle back and forth between being a little bit charming, like brother sister, sort of like
right.
They have this inside knowledge, they have these jokes, to also being really manipulative and scary, in that you're just sort of one sentence away from someone flipping out, which obviously was his experience with her, and that she became very violent at the drop of a hat. And so it was clear where that feeling came from, because I was uncomfortable just watching her.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think this is going to show a bit of a descent for Rei after meeting her, because honestly, with the way the series has been going, I don't see a good resolution to this next match regardless that he's going to have, because I think she's now in his head.
Yeah, so if he wins, he's hurting someone, and if he
loses, then he's weak. He doesn't have the will to keep going.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we already know that the stakes are kind of high already, as established before, about how the fact that he needs to start winning some games, or else he's going to start getting demotions and then being kicked out of classes. Or kicked out of his class, essentially.
Yeah, his professional shogi class, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I thought this was a very interesting parallel to Nikaido, who seems to be something on the rise. Because the series, this is something I've been slowly realizing here. Nikaido was very much treated as a joke when he was first introduced.
Right.
He was weirdly obsessive of Rei, and he just sort of jumps into his life and doesn't leave him alone. And but he's not as good as Rei. He's just kind of this weird, fat, strange guy. He won't leave him alone, but he's not as good as Rei. You know, he can't stand up to Rei.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about that as well is that Nikaido is also, without realizing it, sort of devaluing Rei without Nikaido understanding that's what's going on here. For example, this was brought up in an earlier episode. Rei seems to have something of a thing for Akari just based on how much, how just genuinely caring she is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first instance we see of Nikaido
Yeah.
sort of overtaking Rei almost because, because the one she's actually attracted to is Nikaido. She sees Rei as just sort of this person she can take care of.
Mm-hmm.
And now in this episode, we're seeing, okay, so here we have Hina, who wanted Rei to teach her how to play shogi. She approached Rei with this. Nikaido butts in, but he's actually the much better teacher over Rei.
Mm.
And Rei doesn't really get to do anything. Not only that, but when he goes to see his old shogi friends like Mr. Smith... Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
They talk very passionately and very enthusiastically about Nikaido, how touching they thought it was during that one match of his, of Rei's, that
Nikaido
he was
cared so
basically
much.
trying to help his friend.
Yeah. And so you're right. I didn't think about this, but all Rei hears is other people telling him how great Nikaido is.
Right.
And so when Nikaido just shows up and wants to be Rei's friend, he's like, "Back off, man! You are taking my life. Like, the few good things I have, you're intruding on them."
Yeah, you're encroaching on my good life, and not only that, but Nikaido is freaking rich.
Yeah.
He's loaded. He has his butler bring him a bed just so he can sleep in Rei's house.
Yeah, I wonder, and this is the last thing before we need to move on.
We gotta move on.
Do you think there's any parallel between Nikaido showing up unannounced and sleeping over, and then Kyoko doing the same thing?
I was thinking about that, and I couldn't quite make the connection there, but that thought had occurred to me, and I guess it's just that Nikaido, in spite of everything, I don't think Rei wants to admit it, but Nikaido is still a positive influence on his life. Because I think he's trying to... without knowing it, he's showing Rei that people can intrude in people's lives and not...
hurt them.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what Rei feels like. He intruded on Kyoko's life and, her whole thing, and basically hurt all of them.
Right.
Whereas Kyoko is intruding in his life. He doesn't want her there, but in a weird way, he kind of does.
Yeah, so you think it's sort of like a dark side, light side, where he's been presented with both options for the way he can move forward, and he's probably going to follow Kyoko.
Yeah, probably. I think the series is going to end still with him pulling out of it, but I think things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So speaking of things getting worse, do you want to talk about Scorching Ping Pong Girls?
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay. So the episode begins with Agari starting her match against Zakuro, and she can't seem to make any headway against her. She's using her famed forward smash, even though she was established as being a driver.
Right.
But the two are neck and neck constantly. And Agari is frustrated because she should be pulling ahead very easily. We don't really get much description as to how she should be pulling ahead or what Zakuro is actually doing to shut her down.
Yeah.
And but, whatever. And during this match, we get a bit more history on Karuri, who transferred to the school. She was already a very talented player ahead of time. I didn't quite catch that. She was in a club, I think, before.
Yeah.
Just in a separate... I don't think it was related to her high school, her previous school, or I could be wrong about that. But she was in a club before, and she was a very talented member of that club. And she basically beat down all of the seniors of that school. Of her new school.
Mm-hmm.
And when she did that, she was expecting to be sort of dejected, or maybe she just didn't even think anything about it. But the girls there are like, no, it's fine. If you beat them, you should be our captain now, because if you beat them, then they couldn't handle the game anyway. So we want you to be our captain, and we want you to train us. And what we find is that Kururi is kind of insane when it comes to her training. And she's just working these girls to the bone. And these girls have essentially bitten off more than they can chew.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody quits, which leaves Kururi completely alone. And she's realizing to herself, I can't interact with normal people.
Right.
That is until Zakuro shows up to practice, completely bandaged for some reason, but okay. And what happens is Kururi she gets very excited about this because, oh, okay, so I got one person who can stick with me. And so the two continue to practice. Zakuro slowly gets better and better. They attract a couple of new players who are the current players on the team. And Kururi decides, okay, Zakuro should be the captain here. She's better at leading people than I can.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for Zakuro, she doesn't anticipate the fact that Agari suddenly has a very good left backhand.
Uh-huh.
And that is what causes Zakuro to eventually lose. That's what allows Agari to pull ahead in the end. And because Agari found motivation because she wants Koyori's heart to go Doki Doki during her final match. And she knew that if she lost this match, then Koyori wouldn't be able to play.
Right.
And then the next match begins, and we have Kururi using some sort of tornado technique to essentially control the course of the ball.
Yeah. And then it just sort of ends there, and that
Right.
Koyori isn't able to return
Right.
Kururi's serve.
Right.
It is, well, and briefly, the tornado, luckily, I think, was a metaphor.
Yeah. I should mention that.
Yeah, but so Kurori is able to put on, and they'll describe it next episode. She's able to put on some kind of spin where no matter how the other person returns it, there's so much spin on it that it will slice off the table if they try to hit it back. But yeah, so there's a couple things I want to bring up with this episode. The first and most important is the blushing.
Yes. Can I just bring that up? Can I talk about
Sure,
that just
go
real
ahead.
quick? Yeah. Well, because we did a simul watch of this one, and was it me or you who brought it up?
I noticed it first.
Okay. Yeah, you were the one who noticed it first. Well, because I remember now because you noticed that their legs and their knees and their elbows were really red.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, they haven't been diving or anything or that, right? And then I was trying to look for what you were talking about, and I noticed that all the girls were blushing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it occurred to us, they've been blushing all of this time.
Yeah, it's just built into their character designs that every character is blushing all the time, akin to Sakamoto from Days, but it's every character.
It's a little less obvious because, again, you don't notice the tones so much because it took us 9 episodes to actually notice it. Whereas with Tsukamoto, I think we notice it almost immediately.
Well, he just has pink circles on his face.
Right, so you can't. It's kind of hard to ignore something like that. But when it's kind of subtly imbued into their skin tone, you don't notice it too much. But yeah, all of these girls are just blushing all the time.
Yeah, they're not just blushing. No matter whether they've been doing physical activity or not, they're blushing, their elbows are blushing, and their knees are blushing at all times.
Right, and
go ahead.
I don't know where that... It comes from somewhere in recent art trends in anime. It's this whole notion that girls are so shy that they need to just be... like, the blood must just constantly be rushing to them.
Yeah. Well,
I think
they do blush easily whenever they have an emotional reaction to anything, their face goes completely red. That's a recurring thing. But they're just it's just so strange to me. Who thought it would be a good idea for their faces and all their extremities to never not be blushing?
Right? I don't know. It's
Well, not
again, it's one of
extremities,
those creepy
appendages.
pandering things.
Yeah.
Like, because you have to have your pure wife who's just always a little bit shy, just because that's what the blush signifies. They're just a little shy,
Yeah.
but they're still very pure.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
it's just, oh my god, it's just, it's gross, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the show is becoming increasingly that way. So what did you think of the ping pong that definitely was played in this episode?
It was not
Yeah.
definitely played.
Yeah.
It was very clearly just completely skipped over, almost.
Hmm.
And I guess my problem is that we don't really even get any explanation as to how Zakuro is able to shut down
Yeah,
Agari.
what's her strategy? Hitting it
Yeah,
back?
that's what it is essentially. She's just hitting it back.
Yeah. It
It's having the same problem that Cheer Boys ended up having, which was they started off seemingly knowing something about the sport that they're trying to engage in, but then they just break down and it's like, oh, they just do it.
Yep.
And it's not that interesting.
Yeah, and they have a similar problem that Cheer Boys had where a lot of action happens off screen. I mean,
Yeah.
there were entire games in this match with Agari where you just had sound effects of ping pong being played and then still shots of other characters reacting while the score
Yeah.
went up.
So this was very definitely a series where, at the very least for the ping pong sections, they kind of blew their budget at the beginning of the series to kind of rope people in.
Hmm. Yeah, or they just, the production schedule got out of hand where they were able to get ahead of the curve on the first few episodes, but eventually the production schedule caught up and they didn't have as much time to do actual animation as they used
Right.
to, so they started sacrificing um, the action scenes because they had to. They had no option in order to actually get these episodes done. I mean, that wouldn't
Right.
surprise me at all. It just sucks because it's really boring to watch.
And so, changing subject just a little bit here, I don't understand Agari's motivation. Well, it's not so much that I don't understand it; it's just that
She
it's
wants
stupid.
Koyori's heart to go Doki Doki. I think she explained that very clearly, Matt.
Well, okay, fine. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense the way they explain it. I think it's just your classic Yuri baiting where they
Right.
don't say enough to justify it in universe, but they say enough to get the fanboys to create a headcanon of
Right.
these characters being together and having an unspoken emotional relationship. Um, so making Koyori's heart go doki doki, she just wants to make Koyori happy because that's all she cares about. Like, okay, but why though? Because they met like a month ago and just
Right.
play ping pong after school, and you haven't seen
Well,
anything else.
Well, because again, that was kind of established before. I felt like their relationship was decently established at first because Koyori was sort of challenging Agari. She was
Yeah,
becoming very complacent. She just wanted to be the number one, and Koyori shows her, hey, there's more to the world. There's more to ping pong than just trying to be number one.
right. They were rivals and then friends, but now it's like, why do they both blush around each other so much when either of them says anything to the other one's like, "Oh
Right.
my gosh."
Uh,
It's like you see
well,
each other
what I was
every day. Why are you freaking
yeah,
out?
yeah, exactly. What I was trying to get at more is just the what I was just trying to get at was this is supposed to be a practice game.
Yeah.
So the fact that Agari's motivation comes from the fact that because if she loses, then that means that the match is over and then they all have to go home. But it's a practice match. They're trying to learn from one another,
Yeah,
Why wouldn't they just have her play the game anyway?
well, in universe, it's because Koyori has such an amazing love of the game that anytime she plays, her heart goes doki doki, and it's just her favorite thing in the world. And Igari doesn't want to be the one to deny Koyori having the chance to go
Right.
doki doki.
I know, I understand that. I'm just saying that practically it doesn't make any sense. It's a practice session. Just
Yeah,
just
just
ask. It's like, okay, I know we
oh
lost, but do
yeah,
you mind if our if we have this very talented newcomer, do you mind if we have her just practice against Karuri in a real match?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, there's nothing that's stopping them. They're just girls
Right.
in a
This
gym.
isn't like they're not at the tournament.
Right. Yeah, that's a funny point. I don't know. This series isn't smart enough to address that possibility.
Yeah, and I know. I did want to just mention one thing. I did like Karuri's backstory. I did mention before I did kind of like this episode before we started our
Yeah.
recording. That was the thing I did like, and that was the sign of the Scorching Ping Pong Girls I did originally like.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was good. I thought it justified a lot of the relationship with her and Sakura. It's like, oh, okay, here's this really socially awkward person who finally found someone that isn't put off by her. So,
Right.
um, so Karuri's whole goal is to nurture Zakuro and to make Zakuro a celebrity, as a way of saying thank you for being my friend when everybody else gave up on me.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, okay, you earned that one. You didn't earn anything else
Right,
with
but you know what?
all of
That
your main characters, but you earned that one.
right. I thought it was a bit of an interesting take on the character who try and the captain who trains their team too much.
Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, it wasn't good.
No,
Um,
no, it wasn't.
the show is not getting better. We went into this hoping that we would be seeing a set of episodes where you had a lot of ping pong, and somehow in a set of episodes that are dedicated exclusively to a ping pong match, there's actually less ping pong than there ever has been.
Yeah.
So I think that's all that needs to be said about that. Uh,
Yeah.
do you want to move on to Tiger Mask?
Yeah.
All right.
Go on to it.
So Tiger Mask episode 9, it basically starts off the tournament between the masked Japanese wrestlers and GWM. So the Japanese team, there's 4 Japanese wrestlers and 4 GWM wrestlers. The Japanese have Fukuwara Mask, Tiger Mask, and then Ryu in a mask who calls himself Dragon Young, and Tanahashi in a mask who's calling himself It's the Ace,
Yes.
which is the best name in the show so far.
Yeah.
It's even hyphenated. It's the Ace.
Yes.
Hyphenated. Um, so on the other side is some random guy who's gonna lose. Uh, Tiger the Dark, Yellow Devil, and the European champ Wagner, who apparently is just Kevin in a mask. um, and so Takuma talks to Yellow Devil. He really wants to spar with him. Yellow Devil says something like, "Sparring won't be enough for you," so you can assume that Yellow Devil recognizes who Takuma is. Um, they set up the tournament and they have it split up so Tiger Mask isn't able to fight Yellow Devil at first. And he just jumps up over to Yellow Devil and says, like, I don't care what they say, I want to fight you. Ends up getting in a brawl with Tiger the Dark in the middle of the ring, and they have to get separated. Ultimately, the first match is Fukuwara Mask fighting Tiger the Dark, and Fukuwara is very funny, and then Tiger the Dark does a Darkness Driver and knocks him out at the end. Um, and then the second match is supposed to be Tiger Mask versus Kevin/Wagner. Um, but a mysterious man in white shows up in the ring, and it's a guy calling himself Mr. Question, representing India,
Yes.
which is apparently supposed to be a reference to the old show. And so Mr. Question beats up Wagner and then takes his place in the fight. So the next episode, he's going to fight Tiger Mask.
Okay, so I felt like this episode is getting the series more to a place that I wanted to see in the first place.
Silliness?
We have what?
His silliness?
Yes, there we go. We're starting to finally get weird matches with weird characters.
Yeah.
We have pretty stupid moments like Fukuwara Mask apparently just traveling to the stadium on the bus in full gear.
Yeah.
With everybody commenting, is that a pro wrestler? Like, it's like, why would you? It's like, we've seen who Fukuwara is underneath the mask.
Yeah. Why would he
We
leave the
don't.
mask on in public?
Right. I understand that as the viewer, you want to show the scene just to, to kind of preserve this mystery of Fukuwara Mask, but it's not really a mystery to us anymore. We know who it is.
Yeah, even though we don't know who it is, we just know we've seen
We
his
know what
face.
he looks like,
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
That's the important part. And also, I love the presence of Mr. Question.
Mr. Question.
Mr. Question! He's so cool, and as soon as he showed up, I was just immediately excited as soon as I saw that costume.
Yeah. It's just, so it's basically his costume is billowing white robes, a long white cape, and he's wearing a slanty kind of turban
Yeah.
on his head, and he just identifies himself as Mr. Question, representing India. Okay.
One of the best parts is that they mention that, okay, so I guess instead of going up against Wagner, we're going up against Mr. Question, who we have no data on. But they mentioned earlier in the episode that he's the All Asia champion.
Yeah, it wasn't clear if that was referring to the original Mr. Question.
Oh, okay.
Because he mentions that like he's taking the place of an old Mr. Question who fought Tiger Mask before. So it was a bad line, but that's what I interpreted.
Okay, that's fair.
It was funny though that when he jumped in, he said, "Who's Wagner? I've never heard of him." And they referred to that earlier in the match where everyone's like, Wagner, guys, he's not the European champ. It's just Kevin." Like, why? And Miss X is basically just like, it's fine, it's whatever. The internet doesn't exist. No one will know.
Nobody will know. It's fine. People just. That was actually something I did kind of like a little bit, was that they do acknowledge, okay, so these are not the same people in these costumes all the time. People will take over costumes.
Yeah.
This is a wrestling series that is actually somewhat addressing the fact that these are characters people are playing. And that, okay, so sometimes people will put on a new costume and, they will take on the mantle of the old wrestler.
Unless it's Gorilla Jitsing.
Right, well, of course.
So what did you think of Fukuwara Mask's match?
I wanted to like it.
Yeah, but it was terrible.
Right. So
go ahead.
I have one real big complaint about it. I was generally fine with it at first.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that when he gets Tiger the Dark on the ground, he goes up onto the post, and he does his dive bomb onto him, but he misses.
Yeah, for no reason.
For no reason. And so, okay, I realize that he's trying to play up the clown. That's his whole act. Is that he's the clown wrestler. He's the goofy one. He's the funny one, but he sort of weirdly pulls out wins.
Uh-huh.
But we already saw in the episode before, when he was introduced, that he's actually a very good technical wrestler still.
Mm-hmm.
When brought to the point, he can still do what he needs to do.
Yeah.
So the fact that he wasn't able to pull off that pile driver, or not that pile driver, that dive bomb or whatever it was, that diving thing he was doing, he should have been able to do that, I feel like.
Yeah, what was the point of him showing up just to lose? I mean,
right.
That's what gets me is that in the original Fukuwara Mask episode, it felt like the show was trying to establish, okay, this is going to be a character. He has a lot more depth than he seems like on the outside. He's a really good wrestler. He has a face. Remember this face. But none of that came up again. He just lost in the first round. And I guess on some level, yeah, he's not going to beat Tiger the Dark because of plot reasons, but why did they have him fight Tiger the Dark? Why wouldn't he have shown some value instead of just disappearing after the first round?
Be the one who goes up against It's the Ace.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, It's the Ace is on his team, so he wouldn't go up against him.
Oh, fair enough.
He would go up against Poseidon.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's a non-character, so who cares, Because now, what is it? It's the Ace is going to fight Poseidon, just in order so that we can all see Tanahashi get destroyed by Yellow Devil, right?
Right.
After, have to admit, I am very much looking forward to Ryu getting straight up murdered by Yellow Devil.
I hadn't even thought about that. Also, I can't believe I didn't make that connection between Ryu and the wrestler. I didn't notice that part.
Well, I mean, they never say it explicitly, but it was.
Oh, okay, but it's obvious that's who they are.
Yeah, because Tanahashi's costume is exactly the same except for his mask, and
Oh, okay,
Ryu
fair enough.
looked the same. Like the only wrestler who actually showed up at the New Japan Pro Wrestling match was Rainmaker, and he was just like, "Wow, looks like everybody else is in the other match, huh?" But yeah, so that was kind of funny. But again, I feel like they really wasted Fukuhara Mask.
They
Um,
did.
and then, yeah, honestly, not much happened in this episode. It was a lot of setup for Tiger Mask's big match against this random character who showed up. And I like Mr. Question. I liked the line where Tiger Mask asks him, "Hey, who are you?" And Mr. Question just points at the question mark on his chest. And Tiger
And he's
Mask
just
says,
like,
"Oh, I guess it's a mystery." And he says, "I'll tell you if you win." Ooh.
right.
So, I don't know.
Uh, the preview for the next episode looked pretty good, though. It looks like we're getting a return to form for the animation.
Oh, good.
That was one just small thing I wanted to bring up as well. The art in this episode looked a little rougher, but it was a good type of rougher.
Yeah.
I feel like it seems because I feel like the past episodes have been too sterile, and this one felt a lot more stylized than the past couple.
Yeah, I agree. It felt campy. It was fine. Honestly, if we hadn't had the past several episodes, I would have liked this one a lot more. But I've grown
Right.
sort of defensive about Tiger Mask.
No, I understand what you mean.
All right. So speaking of strong defense, do you want to move on to All Out?
Sure thing. Okay, so the episode starts off with Ibumi taking over for Oharano,
Mm-hmm.
and then what happens is they make a punt to the other side. Jinko makes a punt to Sagami,
Mm-hmm.
and they think that okay, so they're in a desperate situation, so they're going to try and punt to us, and take the ball.
Mm-hmm.
However, what happens is the receiver, who I believe I think his name was Hana.
Yes.
Yeah, Hana. He goes to receive the ball, but instead the ball gets snatched from him, and Ibumi's the one who does it, and he destroys Hana. He just smashes him.
Mm-hmm.
And Ibumi makes a try.
Mm-hmm.
And so the match starts playing out. They realize that Ibumi's really the only threat throughout the game. Sagami does, I mean.
Yeah.
And so in the halftime or during a timeout, the coach brings them over and says, "Okay, so this is where we are right now." Because Sagami has pulled ahead, and he tells the boys, "Okay, so you guys know that you can't take on the second best.
Yeah.
So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna steal what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to learn. This is a practice game. You're gonna learn from them. Whatever they do, you try and steal it."
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, they start finding. Iwa has a moment where he's being very scared, as per usual. Yeon talks to him and tells him, "Hey, you need to stand up straighter. You know, you need to look more imposing, essentially." Because I saw this on TV during a rugby match I was watching.
Mm-hmm.
And Iwa starts to find some more confidence after this, even though he can't pull off the look right.
Yeah.
He still manages to kind of grab somebody by the foot as they pass by and knock him down.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point we go to a flashback with the advisor who's been watching all this game, and he's been very snarky about things. But he's starting to get a little bit more into the game, and he thinks back to when he was first asked to be the advisor. He was thinking it was by like another teacher, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
who was like, "Hey, we got this rugby team. They need an advisor. Can you do it?" And he actually genuinely wanted to help them out.
Yeah.
But he could, but he didn't know anything about the sport. But he thought, okay, well, I'll look into it. Maybe I'll grab some books for them. I'll buy some rugby books, and I'll try and study up on it. But anytime he tries to connect to this team, they shut him down. They're like, "We're not going to bother teaching you. We don't want to deal with this."
Yeah.
And eventually, the advisor just grows. Yoshida, he just grows more and more bitter towards the team, and he's like, "Fine, they don't want my help. I'm not going to help them."
Yeah.
And he finally starts to see the real passion in this when he sees Sekizan get a brutal knee to the face.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody drops a ball, he starts to die for it, but one of the guys from Sagami High tries to kick it.
Yeah, he ends up getting kicked in the forehead. Yeah.
But Sekizan is just excited. This just kind of awakens something in him. He's like, "No, I'm having fun."
Yeah. And
And
that
then
might have been the concussion talking, but
right. But yeah. So and uh and I think that's about where the episode ends.
well, I mean, ultimately, yeah, they lose the match,
Right, yes.
because so Jinko tries to they play hard to the end, but ultimately there's no way for them to catch up. So they do
Right.
lose right at the end, but it sort of ends on Yoshida having this realization that he's like, oh my gosh, I haven't actually watched any of these guys play rugby in years. Like he's
Right.
like, it's been 2 years since I've even seen a rugby match. These aren't like all the bitterness I had towards this team was for students that aren't here anymore.
Right.
Which I thought, I mean, I think that was the one of the couple big things from this episode was the transformation of Yoshida. So we knew going in that somehow or other this cynical, bitter team advisor was going to learn to love rugby and love this team again. Because why else would they have this plot element? Um, I thought they did it about the best way they could have.
Right. Which
They.
was he was basic, he was he wanted to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that his bitterness came from the team itself. Because going into it, my guess was that he was going to be someone who had never played sports, and
Right.
so his bitterness was just based on the fact that he saw people who played sports as losers and who didn't learn anything, who weren't as hardworking as him, who didn't take their career seriously, and it was just a waste of time. It was just going to be simple, like, this is a waste of time, studying is a good use of time.
Right.
But no, this is someone, and I realized there was going to be a little more depth to this one when the coach looked at Yoshida, because Yoshida had been giving these snarky remarks,
Right.
and the
And
coach.
then he mentions like he sort of loses a little bit. It's like, "Hey, that was a knock on."
Well,
Or
yeah,
something like
and
that.
this is after the fact that the coach looked at Yoshida and he says, "Did something happen to you in the past?" There's like he
Right.
gives this really honest feeling, like, dude, like who hurt you? And Yoshida doesn't want to answer that, but like the coach can tell, like this isn't about rugby. This is about like
Right.
someone hurt you before, and
Right. It like the coach is kind of like, "I might have been a little off base with you
yeah,
before."
exactly.
Because his whole thing was like, "Hey, you're not giving these boys a chance. You're not doing your job as an instructor, as like a teacher." And he's like, "Okay, there's clearly a little bit more to the story
Yeah,
here than I
yeah, this is a
thought."
little more personal. So it is nice to see that he tried to be exactly what the coach would have wanted him to be. He tried to be someone who would inspire the students, but they literally just told him to shut up and go away and not bother them. And they
Right.
didn't want him around, so he just donated his books, which Sekizan ended up studying without
Right.
Yoshida knowing that. But he was so bitter about the experience of being hurt by the students in the past that he didn't give them a chance. Um, so I mean, on some level, it's a little cheesy. He's like, oh
Right.
well, like Sekizan actually cares. Like maybe I can be appreciated by the students. But I thought it came from a realistic place where like how
Right.
do we become cynical and bitter? It's because we've been hurt and we're trying to protect ourselves.
Right.
Um,
And
and I like that.
yeah, and I think that I think you put it you said it well before when you said like this is about the best resolution that they possibly could have hoped for with this.
Yeah.
Because we going into this we knew this guy was gonna like see the light.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But I'm just gonna change subjects here for just a moment. Can we talk a little bit about Abumi?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Abumi is amazing in this episode.
Yeah.
Just and it's not just Abumi, it's just the animation just took a real step up.
Oh yeah.
Like the hits are just so intense.
Well, they're
And
so fast. I mean, the way it looks is when you see someone get tackled, you're seeing a bunch of guys running together, and then suddenly one of them will just like fly off screen, and they'll be like,
right.
"What happened? Where'd he go?"
Whoa!
You know?
Or just like when Abumi like knocks this guy down, like when he knocks down Hana, he's not just like stunned, he's like gurgling.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like
Because
it's like he got like choked
well,
almost.
I mean, what happens was Ibumi jumped to receive the ball, and in doing so, it kind of implies that he intentionally kept his knee up, and he kneed Hana in the chin or the throat to
Right.
knock him over, and then just ran in for the try. So after that, Hana was pretty much
He was
broken.
scarred from
Well,
that.
yeah, I mean, I'd be scared too if a guy had just jump kneed me in the face. Um,
Right. And Ibumi takes advantage of that. Like he got in his head because Ibumi just darts right for him, and Hana is just helpless.
yeah,
He doesn't know what to do.
yeah,
And then he has this amazing moment, this amazingly tender moment with this guy, where after he's knocked down and he's just sort of stuck on the ground, Ibumi just walks over behind him and just starts adjusting his helmet for him and is being like, I can help you get your helmet back on.
well, yeah, and he says like, "Hey, you need to make sure you keep your helmet tight, otherwise I won't be able to hit you at full strength." And you're like,
Right.
"Wow."
It's like, oh my god, you're just getting right into his
Well,
head.
and that's funny because it sort of parallels with what the coach said earlier about like anything they can do, you should steal it. And so
Right.
the big thing from the last episode was that Sagami was getting in Jinko's head. Right? They were playing on their
Right.
emotions and they were scaring them and throwing them off their game. And Ibumi's trying to show, hey, look, I'm just as capable of getting in people's heads. This is something we can do. This
Which
is
is
a
a
strength.
really
Yeah.
interesting turn because I thought what they were going to try and do was they were going to try and do the day strategy where it's like, oh, this is the dishonorable way of playing.
Oh yeah.
Like we're above this method of play. No, this all out is just like Jinko High's like, no, we're gonna do this.
Well,
We are
yeah.
not above it. We are not above playing dirty.
No, and at no point does it criticize Ibumi for anything that he does.
Right, and it's kind of it's refreshing.
Yeah, I agree.
Like this is the sports series that's like down in the gutter.
Oh yeah, and I mean the characters generally they're not that well fleshed out yet,
Right, that's
but they do feel a little more like teenage boys than a lot of sports series do. And
yeah,
we
exactly.
said that last week. I think hopefully that's going to be something they're consistent about moving forward. It is so strange that the animation has only caught up in like after 7 episodes worth. That like
Right,
only now is it really at a place where there's something to be excited about.
right, and it's like I am at a stage now where I am willing to say All Out is good. I actually really like this series now.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to say one more thing before we move on, but you joked before we started recording that All Out was stealing all the good energy from Scorching Ping Pong Girls, and one other parallel it has with that is that this was a practice match,
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
and the coach said, "Hey guys, like the score doesn't matter. It's a practice match. Just like do the best you can and try and learn something." Whereas, which makes sense because that's what practice matches are for. They're practice. They're not the end of the world if you lose. Whereas Scorching Ping Pong Girls said, we have to win this practice match or else, and you're like, or
Right.
else what? And they're like, or else. You're like, wait, you haven't explained anything.
Right.
So once again, All Out addresses its own universe and justifies it in a way that seems realistic, whereas a lot of other
Yeah.
shows just go for fighting spirit.
Right.
Not the show, just the spirit, and they're not really able to justify that. So speaking of shows that can't justify themselves, do you want to talk about Days?
Yeah, go for it, man.
All right, there's not much to say on this one.
No, it sucks.
It, yeah, exactly. They still aren't able to finish this dang match. Um, the uh, the cliffhanger from last episode was that Sakamoto had a shot, and then they show that shot, and he deflected off the crossbar again, of course. Um, they have a weird conflict on um, the Keogawara side between the forwards and the defenders on whether or not the forwards are going to be able to score, and they get in a fight over who's going to be able to score and whether the defenders are going to be let down by the forwards. And there's some weird flashbacks about it, how they only got the defenders to join the team because they promised they would score a lot of goals. So when they don't score, they're letting their team down in a very specific and personal way. Anyway, ultimately, the whole episode is a lot of still shots of people making incredible plays with speed lines in the background and everyone almost barely scoring a goal, but they're able to pull it off. And Seiseki's defense is so amazing and their shots are so amazing, but no one's able to score. Um, Ultimately, towards the end, Usui is on offense. He sort of runs forward to assist because Seiseki's down a man, and Keogawara uses the top secret grab his shirt and pull him technique to try and stop him. Um, but Sakamoto is able to get the ball. He gets fouled. Kimishita takes a free kick, and everybody jumps to block his free kick, but he shoots under them and scores the end. So now Seiseki's up 2-1, but there's still an indefinite amount of time left in the match with 2 episodes left.
Yeah. Okay, so there was one small thing I wanted to address real quick about it, which was you had kind of pointed out how Kale Gawara's, they're sort of falling apart. I think what they're trying to establish in this episode is the difference between Kale Gawara and Seiseki,
Yeah.
which is how Kale Gawara is the new school. They don't know how to deal with pressure, especially like because they're tied. They're tied up, or are they down during that break? I don't remember. And so they're sort of going at each other's throat.
Yeah.
They're kind of going at each other's throats, and they don't know, and nobody's stepping up to kind of calm everybody down. Whereas Seiseki, they're starting to go at it, and Usui just sort of butts in and gets everybody to calm the heck down.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And
yeah. I guess that is a parallel and an uninteresting one, but it's a parallel.
I don't think it's that uninteresting. Again, the problem is that the series doesn't know how to make it interesting.
Right.
I think it's a fine parallel because it shows, this is the advantage of having experience. You have people who are trained up who know how to deal with situations like this. Like, it's not so much about just the physical ability of the players, but also their sort of their mental connection.
Yeah, that's true.
The problem is that Usui calms them down in the most boring method possible. He just walks up to them and tells them to close their eyes and take a deep breath.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what anybody would tell you to do.
Yeah, also it helps the animation budget because they can literally just pan over people standing quietly with their eyes closed.
I hadn't quite thought about it like that, but yeah, you're not right. You're not wrong.
Yeah, it's true. I think the thing that bothered me about it with Keogawara is, like they do in every episode of Days, the plot development hinged on the personalities of a bunch of characters we've never seen say anything before.
Right.
So it was all these Keogawara defenders who suddenly have personalities and feelings, whereas there were really only 2 characters on the team before this, and now there's a conflict between random characters with a random exposition, and none of it feels earned.
Right. Well, because one of the big problems is that because they talk about how these characters who are raising issues, they're the ones. They're the veterans of the team, the veterans of this 2-year-old team.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Like, you all joined the team together 2 years ago.
Right. Right, but they're kind of trying to act like they're the superiors, like they're supposed to be the captains of this team over Kai and Maru.
Yeah.
But it's like, they're trying to play the role of like the grouchy seniors who are trying to put the younger students in their place.
Yeah.
But again, they're of the same age, and Kai and Maru started the team. They're the ones with seniority, so
Yeah. I mean,
I don't get this dynamic.
None of it's earned. None of it's justified. This show sucks. It's shocking. It's also shocking that they want to spend 3 or 4 episodes on this random semifinal match, and they're just
You're right.
so. I mean, there's only 2 episodes left. The next episode is going to be the end of this match, hopefully, and then
Right.
it's gonna end after 24 episodes, and there's no way they're gonna play Toen Academy in that final match. Um,
No, they are not.
my ultimate fear is that this show is going to get renewed and they're going to pull a Haikyu and have a season dedicated exclusively to one match.
Oh, I don't know whether or not to be terrified or excited about that.
It would make me laugh for literal days and then cry for literal weeks. So
I'm waiting for that announcement at the end of this season.
yeah,
I'm so waiting for it
yeah,
because I'm thinking they're gonna pull baby steps and they're gonna end the season with the announcement of Days season 2.
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back. I would love to see if they're actually making money on it though. Like, who's watching this show other than
I,
us?
because we talked about this before. I found some figures on AmiAmi. They're making figures, fairly detailed and high-priced figures, not of any of the major characters, but well, they're doing it of Mizuki and Kimishita.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine it has fangirl appeal. Not only that, but I had linked you to an article from Anime News Network about the top selling manga
Yeah.
in Japan for this past year, and Days was in like the top 20.
Yeah.
Or it was the top 30 or something like that.
It was top 20. Yeah.
It was top 20?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it was in the top 20.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm just trying to deny it. So speaking of things that I'm trying to deny that exist, do you want to jump through an episode of Keijo for me?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so this was a kind of weird episode of Keijo. It was interesting. It had problems, but
Okay.
so what happens is episode starts off with a flashback of Miata. She's going. It's in because you can tell because it's in sepia tone. She she has like an instructional book for Keijo, and she walks in into her father's into his dojo, and she's like, "I have something to talk to you about, father." And then he just immediately says, "This the conversation is over. We're not talking about this." He doesn't want her to start playing Keijo, surprisingly.
Right.
And then we kind of flash back to the main match. We have an introduction of a new character by the name of Ogre Hanayama, who is a gigantic beefy girl who uses something called the God Hip Impact.
Okay.
Who basically she basically does the Bowser butt pound. If you know what I'm talking.
Yeah, from Smash.
Yeah. And so then what happens is, so I mentioned there are 4 girls on this team. There's Miata. I think I made a mistake last episode. I said it was Rinrin. It's actually Fujisaki,
Okay.
who was the girl that Nozomi fought.
Okay.
Not that you would know or care.
Nope.
But what happens is she goes it's those whose characters and then some girl who's completely unnamed. And I thought this match would start to highlight this character. No, she gets taken out first thing.
Mm-hmm.
She's there to take the hit to show the strength of the other academy, even though we don't even know who this girl is.
Hmm.
And then what happens is, so remember how last episode I was complaining about how they haven't established that, this whole team match thing? Like the whole thing about how the differences between a 1-on-1 match and a 4-on-4 match? Yeah, they just don't bother addressing that. They just immediately Miata, Kujisaki, and Fujisaki just do a unified attack against Ogre and knock her immediately out. So we don't have to deal with her anymore.
Okay.
So really, the match is just about Miyata's match against Nanase. And basically, what we discover is that she has a technique where she can hit people with their butt and make them feel really awkward and weird. I can't quite describe it. I guess it's like she can hit people or counter people and kind of make them numb. But of course the imagery they use with this is tentacles. So
Yeah, that's fun.
what happened? Yeah, that's always fun. And then what happened? So she takes out Fujisaki, Nanase does. And there's this whole big, like, sad defeat scene with Nanase being like, I wanted to win with everybody. But she couldn't do it, and so she wants Miata to win in her place. And it's supposed to be this big touching moment, but it's also like, I don't know, why does this matter? Anyway, so Miata has to deal with her because Kusaki is busy dealing with the other two members of this team, where she is basically... Oh my god, I don't want to talk about this, but... So, she is using her butt to basically to very lightly rub up against these other girls' private parts, and is essentially making them orgasm. I mean, literally that's what the series says. Oh. Like, they're not even dancing around it at this point. That's what she's doing.
Oh.
Now, why? I did appreciate... What do you mean, why?
Well, okay.
You're asking why?
I mean, in universe, why?
In universe, why? I don't know, because it stops them. They don't really give a reason for it. I don't understand why she's just not able to just knock them off like that. She's fast enough.
Right.
I guess it's because Kusaki's kind of weirdly perverted and she enjoys doing stuff like that because of this whole things that she has with trying to get with Nozomi. So I guess that's what they're trying to do. I did appreciate one line during this. Something I didn't mention from the previous episode is that it was revealed that Miyata's father was coming to the match. And so he's in there in the match, and as Kusaki is doing this to these girls, he just sort of dryly proclaims, "This is a technique." And then it just cuts away. And so Miyata uses W acceleration, the full purge.
Ugh.
So this is an advancement of the W acceleration technique that was established from her before. And she almost beats Nanase by using this, but just at the very end she gives out, her legs give out because she's so exhausted.
Sure, of course.
And Nanase sees a chance to counterattack, but Miyata instead starts to... Okay, and this is going to be a part you're going to groan at. I actually thought this is a weirdly interesting part of the episode. So what Miyata does is she starts rubbing her boobs, right? See, I knew what your reaction was going to be, okay? And it's going to get worse. And what happens is she starts rubbing her boobs, and so there's this whole thing established with Nanase about how she kind of has like this sort of heat sensor vision. She can kind of tell where like the warm parts of a person's body is, and that's how she's able, I guess, to numb people with her attacks. And so she notices that Miyata's body is very cold, except around her nipples. So her nipples become erect. And so Miyata actually lifts her swimsuit, and they kind of cleverly shy away from this. They censor it by creating just this shining light. It's supposed to be this very intense scene where she lifts up her swimsuit to expose her nipple, runs towards Nanase. Nanase manages to sidestep, but Miyata catches her swimsuit with her nipple and manages to actually pull her down to the ground in a judo throw.
With her nipple?
With her nipple.
Okay.
And from there, Miyata finally seems to have her father's approval because her father sees that she didn't just run away from judo. She's incorporating her judo into her fighting.
Ew.
Or into this. And so she seems to finally have her father's acceptance.
I'm so glad I'm not watching this show. This sounds like it gets worse every week.
I thought the way that... Okay, so I'm not going to say this was, like, phenomenal or anything like that. I thought it was interesting the way the series is actually using the lewdness, and it's actually turning it into a fighting technique. Like this, because the way this came off was that, like, this whole thing about her using her nipple to grab the girl's swimsuit. It didn't feel as perverted as it sounds watching it.
Okay.
Like this, because you couldn't see anything.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, it didn't feel like a very like a big fan servicey moment. This felt like a girl who was in the moments of desperation and was just at the edge and was using a desperate attack to try and finally bring down this amazing player.
Yeah.
But it's kind of this weird tension between like a weirdly feasible technique. I mean, obviously not really, but
right. in universe
But
feasible.
but this is the first time that I felt like it was using the lewdness as an actual method of attack, beyond just butt slamming up against each other.
Okay. Well, it's a good report from the land of Keijo.
I know you don't want to go into this further, so you want to just go into Long Riders?
Yeah, let's finish out. Not much to say on Long Riders episode 7,
Nope.
except it's, way behind. Um, so the episode starts off with Amy finally ordering the team jerseys. Everyone loves them so much. They're going to be so great. And no one mentions the fact that they're already in a college cycling club, which they apparently don't.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And then Amy goes outside to wash her bike, and then she gets her shirt wet, and you can see her bra through her shirt, and isn't that
Woo!
embarrassing? And then she goes to the bike store, of course, and coincidentally runs into all her friends who just happen to be there.
Not Saki.
And not Saki, yeah. Um, and then they have a 4-minute conversation on the importance of bike maintenance. Um, and then they go on a ride because her road bike is feeling so good. So they go on a ride, and Saki can't go, but they go off anyway. And there's a lot of bad CG, but Amy does well. They get to their turnaround point, and they run into Saki randomly, coincidentally, completely, actually. They try and say randomly. And Saki happens to be wearing their team shirt anyway. And they have curry and talk about how great it is to be a team. And then Saki has a flashback about the time she fell off her bike over a cliff and almost died, and they all laugh at her. Um, and the episode ends with them proposing that they do a bike event together, so they're going to do a 100 kilo race. And Amy says, "What?"
And then episode ends.
Exactly.
Okay, so yeah, you pretty much touched on all the points I wanted to bring up pretty succinctly there.
Thanks.
So yeah, the fact that they just meet Saki there, like, it's not even so much that they happen to meet her on a route.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, on a specified route. They actually met her at the exact same time she was stopping off at this restaurant.
Exactly.
In the middle of nowhere.
And they treat it like it's not crazy.
Right. Like...
Well, we're the only 5 girls who exist, so of course we'd run into her.
And not only that, but she's wearing the jersey. So what was the point of her not being on this ride in the first place?
Well, right, and the way they justify that is that, oh, well, I couldn't check my phone when you texted me because I've already been riding for the last 2 days, and I'm going on this epic, 300 kilo ride by myself because I love cycling, and I don't change my shirt. I don't know.
I don't know. I guess they're trying to establish her as being the super experienced one who's just that into biking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, for the purpose of this episode, I just don't understand why this... Like, just have her go on the ride with them. You can still you can still establish all of this, but just have her go with them. Because you could have done something interesting. If you're not going to do something like, oh, well, she's not wearing the team jersey out on this random bike ride, she just sort of sees these girls, she's not part of the team.
Yeah.
You could do something with the episode about having her, realize, no, these are the girls I want to ride with.
Yeah, exactly. But no, she's riding with the team jersey by herself because she just loves her best friend so much that she never hangs out with.
Her best friends that she just met 3 episodes ago.
Yeah, and I'm gonna mention it every week if I have to, that all, so Saki and Hinako and Yayoi are in a college cycling club at the college that all 5 of them attend.
Right.
And they've never visited it. They have brought up the fact that they should ask Amy and Aoi to join the college cycling club, and then just didn't. Decided to be their own team,
I guess.
Pay their own money for their own shirts, and for no reason. This stupid show. It's so bad.
Right.
There's one point at which Amy is trying on her new jersey, and her sister and her mom see her excited about her new jersey, and then Amy gets really embarrassed because she's wearing her jersey. It's very unclear that
in like
it seems like they're taking every opportunity to make these girls blush. And oh gosh, this is similar to something else. Make these girls blush and get embarrassed and freak out over these random situations that aren't justified. Um, because that's what we want as weird fanboys. Like, I don't know. What does it think we want?
So again, you could have built an interesting joke about this whole fight, because I guess the whole thing is that she's running around in her room in her jersey. I guess because she's acting like a little kid.
Yeah.
And so her sister and mother walk in on her, and they could have done something funny where, like, she sees them and she's like, "What? I was trying to do this privately, but you guys are butting in."
Yeah.
Like, have a moment where she, like, stands up for herself sort of unexpectedly. You could do a joke about that. But no, I guess the gag is, oh, she was doing this by herself and her family watched it, or popped in, and she's really embarrassed now.
Yeah, also, I'm pretty sure that's the first appearance of her mother.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Like, to what end? For a stupid non-joke where she just, like,
right.
blushes? This show is such a painful disappointment for me.
Because I feel like that there's an interest, because you bring up the other cycling club, and I feel like there's an interesting show that could have been had there. Like, they start up their own because they don't like this college bike club, this other club that they have.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, maybe they're overbearing and they just like they like doing it on their own.
Yeah.
And
nope, they just ignore it completely.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of ignored. It's off to the side. There could be an interesting story here, but it's just they just do nothing.
Yeah, except like give extremely detailed advice on bike maintenance.
Right, and because they're trying. I feel like in these past couple episodes they've been trying to establish Yayoi as being, she's the gearhead. She's the one who knows everything about like the structure of the bike. But it's like that's only popped up in these past 2 episodes.
Yeah, and it doesn't really serve any purpose because it doesn't affect the way she rides. Because there has been no explanation about what these characters bring to the table in terms of cycling, other than Saki's good at it and Amy's improving. That's it. There's no technique. There's no abilities. I mean, this isn't a sports show, but it's like really not a sports show. It cares about like the idea of cycling, but it doesn't care about cycling well.
Right.
I took very few notes because there's very little content in this show ever at all.
Yeah, I mean, actually I take more notes on this than I do Days, but that's just generally to complain about it, so
yeah. All right.
I don't know.
I think that might be all I have in my system for this week, Matt.
Yeah, I'm done. Would you hit the credits?
I would love to.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is KoshienCast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We will be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.